Well, if you've been watching my videos for a while, you've probably heard me talk about the clutch in this truck and how it's been acting up ever since we got it. What's happening is the clutch isn't fully releasing all the way, and it makes it really hard to shift gears. Sometimes you even have to turn it off. And it would act up like that for maybe a month or so, and then I would bleed the clutch, and it would seem to help. And then another month later we'd have to do it again. And you can see, even there, you can see how it doesn't want to. There, we got her into gear. But now bleeding in clutch doesn't seem to help. It's gotten to that point where it just doesn't want to work. So we're going to see if we can fix it today. I'm going to throw a new clutch in it, and a new master and slave cylinder as well, just to make sure I got all my bases covered. So let's take a look at the parts we got and then tear this thing apart. Well, here's our new parts. Basically an entire clutch kit. We've got the pressure plate, clutch disc underneath that, new pilot bearing up here, and a new throwout bearing here. And also, I've gone ahead and got new master and slave cylinder with lines, and I went ahead and I got the pre-bled one because these clutches are a bit tricky to bleed out. So I wanted this to go smoothly and not have any issues and just have the thing work. So spent a little extra money, got the pre-bled one, so I don't have to fool with it. If you do have to bleed it, you have to take the master cylinder out and actually tip it upside down and bleed it that way, and that's kind of a pain, so I just went with this route. So let's get started. Okay, the first thing I've done to take the transmission out is remove the gear shifter, and it's pretty easy. You take the little console there off. There's just some screws holding that in, and then you'll see the shifter here, and you can pull up this boot, and what you'll see when you get the boot up is this right here. You'll have a bolt going through it with a nut on one end, and take that nut off, and if you can't tap it out from the nut side forward, one thing that you can do that I did, because this was a little tricky on mine, is take the nut off of this end and put a washer on the other end like that, and then screw your nut on and go ahead and tighten that down. And what that'll do is when you get it tight, it'll pull this this bolt through, and I'll pull this bolt out and show you what it looks like. And this is what that bolt looks like. As you can see, it has a flat side on one edge, and that actually coincides with the flat side on the bottom of the shifter part here. And you want to get those lined up when you put it back in. But the reason for the washer, if you're wondering, is there's a slot on this side of the gear shift. And if you just use the nut, that slot will actually dig into your nut and start taking pieces of it off. So I put this washer on here to keep it from doing that. So now we've got the gear shift lever off, we can crawl underneath and see what we got to take off down there. Alright, I'm underneath the truck now, and I've disconnected the drive shaft at the U-joint, and I'm going to go ahead and take this carrier bearing off, and that will allow me to remove this part of the drive shaft so that I can pull the transmission back and out. Alright, I've gone ahead and got rid of the drive shaft, got that out of the way, and I've also gone ahead and removed these two plugs for the wiring here. It was also clipped up top in a couple of spots. And I've removed or unplugged the O2 sensor as well, so I can take this wire now, this whole harness, and kind of tuck it up here out of the way, hopefully. And then we'll be able to start taking other things off. I think that's all there is for wiring on the transmission. I'll look around some more, but that should be it. So I think next we'll disconnect this clutch line and go from there. Alright, I've got the lines off, and I'm going to show you up here on the new line how they're supposed to come off, in theory anyway. And this piece, which is the line, is plugged into that that slave cylinder, and what happens is these little metal fingers inside here in the slave will clip onto this little tiny lip here on the line. Now in theory, this plastic piece which is attached here, you're supposed to be able to take this tool that they give you, slide it in here, and actually push this forward to release the line. Now, there's no such thing as a quick disconnect on an old Ford. Nothing ever works. These things get all corroded and full of crap, and on mine the plastic just wouldn't move no matter what I did. And the plastic tool they give you really doesn't help. So I use my own quick disconnect, a knife, and I cut the line. Now if you're going to replace the clutch without replacing the slave or the lines, good luck to you. If that doesn't move, yeah, you're kind of screwed. But I've gone ahead, I've cut that line, got it off since I'm replacing it anyway, and I've begun taking the starter off, which is pretty straightforward. And here's the starter. You just take off these two wires here up top on the solenoid, and then you've got 3 bolts on the back. Take those out, and the starter will come right out. Okay, now I've removed the starter, and I can get to the bell housing bolts. There are 8 in total, 2 on each side right here, and 2 on the bottom, and 2 on the top. I've taken these 2 out already. I'm going to take the 2 on the driver's side out as well. I've taken the top one on the driver's side out from the bottom already, and the top one on the passenger side can be taken out from the top. Alright, all the bell housing bolts are loose, but before I go ahead and take them out, I wanted to support the back of the engine with the jack here, so I've got it under the oil pan with a couple of blocks of wood so it protects the oil pan and so I can get it up high enough to hold it. Now that I've got that in there, I can go ahead and take the bell housing bolts out, and it shouldn't move anywhere. And then I can take the rear cross member for the transmission off and slide that thing out. Well, I've got the transmission out of there. It took a lot more wiggling and maneuvering than it probably should have, because I was only able to get one side of this cross member down, so I had to kind of shimmy it out this side, which it wasn't ideal, but it did work. The other side of the cross member, the bolt is actually rusted in to the bushing there, so I couldn't pound it out. But it's out, and now we can crawl under it and take that pressure plate and the clutch off. Alright, we're underneath the truck here again. Transmission's out of the way, and we can get a good view of the pressure plate, and it looks like 6 bolts, and we'll have that off, and we'll be able to take a look at the clutch and see how that's doing. Well, I've got the old clutch out, and it looks in pretty decent shape. It's not worn too bad, but since we're going in there, I figure we might as well replace everything anyway. And here's the pressure plate. And as you can see, well, I hope it's picking it up on camera, it's kind of blue, it's got some spots in it. Got a bit warm, I think, but doesn't matter. Putting in this new one, which looks quite a bit more heavy duty than the old one, that's for sure. So hopefully this thing will work good. But I got it out. Now we're just gonna go ahead and get everything ready and throw it back in. Well, after quite a bit of work and struggle, I finally got the old pilot bearing out. As you can see, the attachment for my slide hammer is quite a bit too big, and that's the only one that I have, so I couldn't use that. So I tried to chisel it out, and that didn't go so well. But I finally found a nice 1/4 inch carriage bolt that I could screw into my slide hammer here. And I was able to hook the back side of that bearing and pop her out of there. So now I can take the new bearing and pound her in and put the clutch and the pressure plate back on. Alright, I've got the clutch and the pressure plate in and torqued down. And as you can see, the alignment tool's in there. That's all nice and centered. And when I'm ready to put the transmission in, I'll pull that out. Now we can go ahead and put the slave cylinder inside the transmission. Alright, here's the slave cylinder assembly with the throw-out bearing. And there's just 2 bolts in here that hold this in. One there and one down here on this side. I believe it's 2 bolts. Yep, 2 bolts. So let's pop that sucker out of there and get the new one in. Well, I've got the old slave cylinder out, and it looks a bit different, but it's the same thing. This new one is. It's just got a boot around it. One thing I did have to do, because I didn't get this coupler off, and I just cut the line, was I had to pound this this roll pin out from the front here, and actually pull the whole line off, so I could get the slave out. But that was simple enough. So now I just go ahead and bolt this thing back in, this new one, and should be ready to put the clutch or the transmission back in. Alright, I've got the new slave cylinder installed. Now I just got to crawl under the truck here and remove that alignment tool from the clutch and tie a few wires out of the way, and I can try to heft that bad boy back in there and get her bolted up. And then after I'm done with that, I can start on the master cylinder and the lines. Alright, I've got the transmission back in and everything bolted back up, and that part's ready to go. And I've taken the master cylinder out, which was a little tricky, but we'll start from one end and I'll show you how to take it out. First, to make life easier, you'll probably want to take this fuse box loose here and the bracket. There are 2 bolts underneath here. You take those out, and then one up under the wheel well right here. Pop those out and you'll be able to move this out of your way. Once that's out of your way, you'll have a lot more room to access the master cylinder. Now, I already pulled this one out, but there's a hose coming from that up to the reservoir here. That's just 1 bolt, pops right off. And I'll show you the inside. If you look on this master cylinder, we have a little a square piece right here, and it fits into a square hole underneath the dash. If I can show you, get a better view here. Alright, you see that little square hole on the left? That's where the master cylinder sits in. So you push the master cylinder in and turn it to put it in, and you just go in through the firewall and turn it to get it out. That's simple enough. And on this end there is a rod. Obviously you just pop that off the clutch pedal. And there is also the clutch switch, which sits on this rod. So you unplug that, and since I have a new one in my kit, I just attacked this with a screwdriver and broke it off. But if you were going to reuse it, you should probably be a little more gentle than I was. But once you get that plastic piece off, this will slide right off the rod, and then you can pull the whole thing through. You can't see it in here, but there's clips that keep this rod attached, and getting those off from under the dash would be pretty tricky, I would imagine, so I didn't do that. Just rip the whole thing out. And there's 1 clip along the frame that holds the hose in, and that's how that comes out. So now I can grab my new unit and fish it through there and see if I can get it all put back together. Well, truck's all done. Got everything put back in it, master cylinder, slave cylinder, and everything, and it works great. No longer do we have the clutch that wouldn't disengage. It shifts real smooth, and it's also easier to push down the clutch pedal now. There's a lot less pressure there, and I'm wondering if it didn't have some sort of a heavy-duty clutch and pressure plate installed in it before, and that may have contributed to the trouble we were having. But yeah, it works really good now. I'm happy with it.